All right, let's get right into it. Today's explainer is all about the massive plot twists that just completely upended the EU AI Act. If you follow Czech policy, you know August 2, 2026 was basically circled in bright red marker on everyone's calendar. But literally right before the finish line, the whole script got flipped. So we're going to unpack exactly how and why that happened. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the August 2 plot twist. Second, inside the Digital Omnibus. Third, competitiveness versus digital rights. Fourth, the backroom political compromise. Fifth, the global AI contrast. And finally, number 6, what happens next. Section 1, the August 2 plot twist. So what actually happened to the biggest date in AI regulation? August 2, 2026 was supposed to be the day. The monumental moment the EU finally clamped down on high-risk AI. We're talking strict, heavy-hitting rules for systems used in super high-stakes areas. Things like employment, critical infrastructure, credit scoring, and law enforcement. The whole world was watching. But then, an 11th-hour legislative plot twist changed literally everything. Just 6 days before that massive deadline, on July 27th, something called the Digital Omnibus quietly entered into force, and it completely rewrote the compliance calendar. The original expectation was that those high-risk rules were locked in for August 2, but the new reality? The European Commission quietly decided the timeline was off track, proposed a massive amendment package, and totally bypassed that highly publicized dates. Section 2. Inside the Digital Omnibus. You know, what's really wild is just how fast this moved. The legislative timeline is crazy. The Commission proposed it in November 2025. By May 2026, they had a provisional agreement. Parliament voted in June, and bam, entry into force in July. For the normally very slow, very methodical European legislative machine, that is an absolute lightning speed sprint. So what exactly changed? The biggest takeaway is that high-risk standalone AI systems got a massive 16-month delay. Their new compliance date is pushed all the way back to December 2, 2027. And high-risk AI that's embedded in existing regulated products like medical devices pushed to August 2028. But importantly, not everything was delayed. Transparency rules like Article 50, which requires labeling AI-generated content, survived totally intact and still took effect on that original August 2 date.
Now, the omnibus wasn't just a delay tactic. It actually threw in some major new elements. It introduced a grandfather clause for existing AI systems. It expanded the supervisory powers of the AI office. It also extended the GDPR's legal basis for processing special category data, basically to help regulators detect bias. But maybe the most crucial addition is a brand new, strict prohibition on AI-generated non-consensual intimate imagery and child sexual abuse material. And that ban actually takes effect much sooner, in December 2026.
Section 3. Competitiveness versus digital rights. Why did the EU suddenly hit the brakes? Well, the European Commission framed this whole thing as a simplification package. They leaned really heavily on the 2024 Draghi report, which sounded the alarm about the EU's economic lag. The report specifically warned that regulatory fragmentation and compliance burden are contributing to the EU's widening productivity gap with the United States and China. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen actually made this exact competitiveness agenda central to her second term. But, of course, there's fierce debate about those motives. The Commission's view is that this is strictly about boosting global competitiveness by removing disproportionate burdens and regulatory overlap. The critics' view, however, is entirely different. Civil rights and privacy groups, like Liberties.eu, argue this is essentially fast-tracked deregulation. They see it as a rollback of fundamental rights that was pushed through without anywhere near the public deliberation the original AI Act got. Even the economic arguments are getting pushback. Analysts over at the Jacques Delors Center point out that the administrative savings are actually pretty modest when you compare them to the massive amount of new legal uncertainty this creates. Plus, they argue, the delay completely fails to address Europe's real problem, its heavy dependence on U.S. cloud and model providers. In fact, they suggest the immediate beneficiaries are just the large tech incumbents who lobbied the hardest, not the smaller EU developers who are still going to struggle with compliance costs. Section 4. The backroom political compromise. So, how did such a divisive delay actually pass? It all came down to some intense backroom horse trading. The political right pushed super aggressively for broader exemptions and delayed compliance timelines.
The political left, on the other hand, made a major concession. They essentially traded away time on the high-risk roles in order to secure a concrete win, that strict, expedited ban on AI-generated intimate imagery we talked about earlier. To understand the pressure cooker these politicians were in, just think about the number 38. According to the Jacques Delors Center, that is the exact number of times Meta representatives met with right-leaning political groups by January 2026. Big tech applied incredibly intense lobbying leverage right where they knew it would count, engaging with these groups way more than they did with centrist blocs. And despite some absolutely brutal negotiations, a committee trilogue in April actually collapsed after 12 solid hours, the compromise worked. The final parliament vote was 423 to 57. That massive margin proves this backroom deal successfully united a huge share of both the right and the center left. Everyone got just enough of what they wanted to cross the finish line.
Section 5. The Global AI Contrast. To really grasp the weight of this, we have to zoom out and look at what China was doing at the exact same time. The contrast is staggering. While the EU was caught up in the Digital Omnibus, passing broad legislative delays and extending timelines, China was rolling out its interim measures. These were rapid, highly targeted bans on very specific anthropomorphic AI services.
The real-world impact in China was literal overnight change. On July 15, 2026, the very day those measures took effect, huge tech giants like ByteDance and Alibaba instantly withdrew personalized AI companion features that were being used by hundreds of millions of people. It's a striking example of two totally different regulatory philosophies. You have the EU's lumbering legislative machine on one side and China's surgical, rapid strike on the other, both operating in the exact same global market.
Section 6. What happens next? So the Omnibus has laid out this brand new compliance runway. December 2026 brings those new prohibitions on intimate imagery. December 2027 is the new deadline for standalone high-risk AI. And August 2028 is the deadline for embedded AI. But make no mistake, just because we have a runway doesn't mean the regulatory regime is fully resolved. There is a lot of legal friction on the horizon. The stability of this whole act hinges on a few massive unresolved questions. First, will the harmonized technical standards actually be finished on time? Because delays there originally caused this whole mess. Second, how exactly will regulators define a substantial modification? Industry is absolutely going to fight for the narrowest interpretation possible to keep their existing systems grandfathered in. And third, we have to ask, was this delay genuinely about EU competitiveness, or was it a massive concession to sustained geopolitical pressure from the US? Which leaves us with one critical question to think about as this global AI race continues to unfold. Will these new 2027 deadlines actually hold, or is this just the first of many, many delays? If technical standards slip again, will we see another right-leaning coalition push for more time? Basically, is this a one-time plot twist or the new normal for AI regulation in Europe? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on December 2027. That is, if it actually stays on the calendar.